we've talked about the risk of the overheating of the economy, but apart from that, or maybe including that, but looking at other risks as well, what do you think is the biggest and also most likely risk for the Russian economy? What is the most likely scenario in which the economy would get under so much pressure that it would actually have to force the Kremlin to change their politics or change their policies in one way or another? Do you even see a scenario like that?
Well, I think it's possible, but it would probably take like two major risk events at the same time, or two major things happening at the same time. First, it would definitely need a low oil price. I think that if Russian oil prices are relatively high, the economy is unlikely to become a problem for Putin because it's basically solves a lot of problems. But if we think about a scenario of low oil prices, meaning that the Urals oil, Russian oil is maybe at $40 or lower for an extended period of time, like it was the case in 2015, 2016, then this would be Russia would be really at risk of a huge economic problem. But it would take another thing on top of that, because even if that happens, Russia still has ways to compensate for that. We would see that the ruble would weaken. We would see inflation going up. We would see an economic downturn, but we would not see a collapse. So, in addition to a low oil price, we would then have to have a significant um, change in sanctions policy, for example. So if then Russian oil exports are falling by in the volume is falling by 50%, which would be possible. I mean, in a situation where we have a low oil price, you have much more ability to sanction because you don't have to worry about the oil price going up so much. So you could do that. This would be a window of opportunity. And if then sort of also Russian oil volumes go down, then the problem would be that it would put a lot of stress on the regime. And the problem for the central bank is that in a scenario like that, it doesn't have the reserves anymore to counter that for a longer extended period of time. So it doesn't have the foreign exchange reserves to stabilize the ruble if it wanted to. In 2014, when the oil price fell from 90, some around 90s to 40s, and then even to the 20s, Russia's central bank initially intervened by selling a lot of its reserves to stabilize the ruble. Afterwards, it let the ruble float, so it weakened a lot. The ruble exchange rate sort of collapsed by half, and something like that could happen again. But it would definitely have to be a major crisis, and I would see it happening mostly caused by if you think about external factors, it's the oil price and sanctions combined, in a very intense way. There are also other things that can happen always. Like you can have a scenario in which the central bank accidentally creates sort of a collapse that because it keeps interest rates too high for too long. Let's say, sometimes you don't have the effects of the very high interest rate for a long time, and then suddenly all at once it shows. So one example is the real estate market. At the moment, you have extremely high mortgage rates. So if you want to have a mortgage in Russia, it's around 30% interest rate right now. And this means, of course, that nobody's buying an apartment. So simply the market is basically coming to a standstill. So nobody is selling apartments, nobody's buying apartments. The companies are not forcing their apartments into the market because they know if they do that, prices will fall a lot. But at some point, they will have to start doing that because their loans are expiring and they have to sort of pay back the money. And so you could see a situation in which then suddenly several real estate companies start pushing their apartments into the markets and the prices start falling. And so, I mean, if you have sort of a chain reaction like that, this could also create a big problem. Um, but other than that, I would say that Russia is the situation is deteriorating in Russia, but and the risks are accumulating, but it can go on to deteriorate like this for a few more years. And deterioration means that sort of the inflation rate is high and getting higher. The budget balance is getting worse and worse, and sort of this would mean longer term deterioration, which is I think a likely scenario. But the collapse scenario or the crash scenario is it's I think it's unlikely, and it would require external conditions to basically intervene in a very dramatic manner.
If you're enjoying this podcast, chances are that you like to know what's going on in the world of geopolitics. And if that's the case, you might want to sign up to my newsletter. There's a lot of news on geopolitics, but most of it just doesn't actually matter. It's just chasing headlines, emotions, and breaking news. What I want to do is to try to separate all this noise and find the signal, the stuff that actually does matter and will have consequences months and years down the line. You can find the link in the description, so check it out and sign up to stay informed.